Don't you know drugs are everywhere, drugs are everywhere, drugs are everywhere. You can't stop it. Living like a bag of pop in a bowl and so with longevity. Drugs are everywhere, drugs are everywhere, drugs are everywhere.
Hey, Murph here. I'm a former heroin addict, current alcoholic, and you're tuned in to Self-Medicated Weekly Dose, a podcast all about drugs and the people who use them. As always, this program is inspired by the harm reduction movement, informed by my personal experience using all sorts of drugs for damn near 30 years, and enlightened by my special guests. And today, have I got a wonderful fella on my hands, and he's going to be on your hands very soon. He's a writer, comedian, actor, currently living in Los Angeles, California. He co-wrote Showgirls, the best movie ever made ever, and is the co-host of the podcast Two Old Queens. He's won 5 Moth Story Slams and 1 Grand Slam. He's also the author of this hilarious memoir, Baked, Sex, Drugs, and Alternative Comedy. Please welcome to the program, John Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, my goodness. You're too kind. Too kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, your fans have waited all day in line.
Oh, anything for my fans. Yes.
Thank you for joining us. So great to see your lovely face. It's been a while. How are you?
I'm doing great. I mean, living the dream in Los Angeles. Very exciting. How about you?
Sure. What a town. Yeah, I'm here in Portland. So, so I tell for the listeners, I know John for many years ago from being at the UCB Theater in New York.
Yeah.
And you were kind of bi-coastal then. You were going back and forth a lot.
A little bit, yeah.
And but then you left us for good at a certain point, and we were all very sad.
We all must, yes.
Yes, we must. So I've made my way sort of out to the West Coast. It's a long coast, so
You're on the West Coast.
There.
You definitely are there.
I'm there. But yeah, I wanted to because it's not every day. I'm very excited. We get an author of an actual book about drugs on here, so we have some great segments lined up. We'll dive into as per usual on the program. But before we get into those, I wanted to just discuss this because. I'm just going to read this quote right in the beginning here from veteran improviser Ben Rogers. He says, everyone at the UCB Theater has a story that begins with, so I had one of John Flynn's pot cookies. Now, I can attest to that. Me and my wife, Diana, the very first time I sampled your cookies was at DCM, an improv marathon that they have every year at the UCB. A debaucherous experience, at least it was back in the day. Had your cookies then. I'll tell you, there were some people around afterwards who sold some cookies after you. Nothing touches the John Flynn cookies.
Really? Wow.
Oh, big time. I'm fine. I'm not going to name names, but I'm fine saying that. And also, as a drug dealer myself, as a drug dealer myself, I want to say you ran a very legitimate, maybe be it illegitimate, but operation here. This is not just, selling on the weekends. This was your full-time gig. I'd say that the kind of drugs I sold and how I sold them was more like if someone said they were a server at McDonald's versus you were a server at Peter Luger's Steakhouse, which those people in New York know is a great establishment. Someone you can trust. Consistency's good. The meat's
solid
good.
Cut of meat. Yeah.
Yep. So tell us what what inspired, because this is just such a great job of weaving together your personal with this, the more fun, salacious stories that bring people to the book in the first place. So tell us you did a great job doing that.
Thank you.
Tell us what kind of pushed you into writing this.
Well, I mean, I got into the business of selling pot cookies just because I needed money. The Showgirl show that you just mentioned, Jackie Clark and I wrote, and it got some success and was being invited to perform at all these different festivals all over the country. And so we had a cast of 8. We needed money to fly them everywhere because we didn't want the cast to have to pay their own way. And so it was initially intended to be this sort of like one-off, one-night thing. But it became very popular. People really loved them. And it was like, this was in the mid-aughts. So this was before weed was legal. And edibles especially were very exotic at the time, early on in my, like most people of my age, at first you just bought weed. There was no like, oh, it's this kind, it comes from this thing and it has these side effects. It was just like, you buy this weed that's in this bag. And so, I don't know, there was something about that was just so that's all I sold was cookies. I didn't sell weed. And, I just put weed and cookies and that was it. And it was a really fun job, and I just loved doing it. I think I had the right personality for it. In that,
yes,
you just meet a bunch of people, you have 5-minute conversations all the time. You're just sort of in and out. And of course, like when you're a drug dealer, you're sort of like the celebrity. Like every time you show up somewhere, people are like, "Yay, you're here!" So it was really fun. And then, I got out of the game, but then like it was just a thing that like. I'd done, I told stories on stage and it was something that people always asked about. And I just thought like I had so much story and so much material there. I tried to do a 1-person show, but it felt like it was impossible to get everything I wanted there into like that structure.
Yeah.
So I decided, I tried my hand at writing a book, and then our mutual friend Will Hines, who's published a lot of books, and he was working on creating his own sort of like publishing imprint. He said he wanted to publish it. So that's how it happened. It happened in a very organic, nice way.
Yeah, and like you said too, the having the personality for it, because this was also a delivery service as well. This was
pretty much. There was no storefront. It was
yeah. Well, of course, again for the kids, thinking of who the hell are these two dinosaurs and what are they talking about? This was way back in the day. This was well before any dispensaries were around. Well before, so this was kind of a delivery service that you pounded the pavement around New York City to deliver
around New York. But New York is a great city to travel through, and and it's such an exciting. I don't know. I just love New York is a city you could live there your whole life and you still find stuff to discover. Like from one block to the next, it feels like a totally different world sometimes. Yes. And so it was just great to just meet all these different kinds of people. I got, invited to people's houses. I went to a lot of parks. Usually was like the first place people want to meet because they're like, I don't know who this guy is. And then, it's funny, like when I meet people for the first time, they're like, oh, you look like Howdy Doody or Conan O'Brien. They're like, oh, I'm not. So then people were like, oh, just come into my office. And so like there was a lot of offices in New York City. They're like, oh, the drug guy's here, But, I got into people's apartments, people's houses, people at their jobs. Like I had, stuff like this is in the book. But, like I had someone who worked at the Met. And so she would sometimes bring me back to like see all this, like artwork that was just like in backstage. I don't know. That's the correct term for a museum backstage, or auction houses or different, like writers' rooms and all just kinds of different places. And it was just so fun and exciting to spend your day being like, I'm going on a whole bunch of mini adventures.
Yes.
And,
what a gig.
I think you just have to be someone who's like comfortable with just, because there are some weirdos and some like awkward people. I'm also like a big guy. So like, there's not a lot of people who I was like intimidated or worried by,
Sure. You are big. That smile though. You're a big fan. So you're also not too intimidating yourself, I will say, from the other end. Looking up at you.
I also think people weren't worried, like, what's going to be in this cookie? Like, is this going to be glass? Like, is it going to be gravel or glass in here?
Yes.
Right.
Is this the old, razor blades in the apple situation? What is this? Yeah, no, I think, and that is something that's funny to you mentioned about the, what's going to be in this and with edibles and stuff. And I think why we were so popular with this business is that, people, I feel like, you find something that you like and it's going to be good. Like that's tough when it comes to, off-label, like just drugs in general. I mean, let alone, let alone baked goods. I feel like, because growing up, like occasionally people would try their hand. I remember like a Rice Krispie treats or, something. Yeah. You go to a festival, you get into the parking lot, I'm saying Fish or everything or whatever the band, whatever the show is. But you sometimes get in the parking lot, you get something decent here and there. But again, you just never know.
Right. And also with edibles, it's like, it takes about an hour. And by that time, whoever you bought them from was gone.
Long gone,
yes. It'd be a really easy way to scam people.
Yes. And there's a lot of stories in here, too, about, the waiting an hour thing is, again, in the early days. Now you go to a dispensary, it's all labeled, it's all very clear, saying you can always take more, can't take less. Yeah. But, when you first start munching on edibles, you're always just like I don't know. It's been I got to get more here. And then next thing you know, you're off. You're up and away.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I feel like that's part of the experience here too. That was very positive for people.
Definitely. Well, also like the great thing about edibles too is you can have them and no one knows. Sales will go up significantly right before Thanksgiving because people will be like, I need these to have at home, and I can like eat half a cookie, and no one's gonna be like, it smells like weed in here. Whereas like you can't like go for a walk or like go to the bathroom where people are like, oh, what have you been doing? Like so, yes. It has a lot of that. They're perfect for going to see movies because you would eat the cookie, then go buy your ticket, get your popcorn or whatever, and you're totally fine. And then if you time it just right,
yep. As soon as those previews end, you start to go.
Here we go, and we're off. So so they're great for a lot of ways.
You also mentioned in here, they are great for a lot of clientele too, because you mentioned singers and Broadway folk and stuff that you're selling to. Also, people don't want to puff for whatever reason, don't like to smoke.
Right. Got to protect the gift, the voice. Yeah,
the gift, of course, yes. Which is always nice to you had a wide range of clientele, but the comedians, I think, in terms of and I know you branched out beyond this, but I would say it's fair to say your bread and butter being at the UCB and starting out. Yeah.
It started at a Christmas party at the UCB Theater. That was the first night where we just made more money than we thought we were going to. It was magical.
I remember. And then you were a bartender at the theater as well. So very much John Flynn was known as a man of merriment.
Mr. Feelgood.
Yes. Absolutely.
Need to alter your mood? Come to me.
Yes, absolutely. Now, now in terms of the book itself, right in this process, did you talk to a lot of because it seems, we've come a ways, culturally, and I'll even say legally. And you also mentioned in the beginning of this book as well, which I thought was just a very thoughtful thing, in terms of, we still got people in jail for marijuana offenses. And I think there's a big push, obviously, gearing towards that. But I think the acknowledgement of that and of your circumstances while selling this, but also of the people in here who are very open with their name and stuff being used, which is an exciting thing. It's not like how has this happened? But I think it has come a long way, because I would even say if you wrote this book, let's say when we were coming up, you know what I mean? It feels like the right
10 years
time.
Ago, it would have
10
been
years ago,
different.
even people might be like, I don't know if I want my name, but it feels like. And you did a good job of some names. Of course, there's no reason to have in here, but for the most part, people giving the
no. If anyone's name is in the book, they okayed it. So there was no one who I would say. But I would also say this: when people are really famous, they tend not to buy their own drugs. They have other people buy the drugs for them. So I was told by a lot of people, "Oh, do you know who like your cookies?" And then all these names. I was like, "Oh, wow, okay."
That's so funny.
I hope to one day meet those people. And
one removed. You're one person removed from these cookies.
Exactly. The assistant too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is funny. Because why would you buy your drugs when you're very famous? That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Like they're going to risk getting caught when they're like, I'll send the assistant. And if they get caught, we'll pay for their legal things, whatever. No big deal. But yeah. Well,
yeah, it's a wonderful book. I would say everyone's got to get out there and get it. Baked, a memoir from John Flynn. We're going to dive into some segments we have here today. And the first one, we're just going to, keep the edibles ball rolling here, the ball of edibles. We're going to keep the weed butter ball rolling here with our first segment called, this is the Substance Report.
This is the question. Do junkies' lives matter?
So, John, yeah.
What a great question. Yeah.
Tough questions. What I like to do here is the mainstream media's narrative on substance use has always been trash. So I like to take some of the top drug-related stories in the news, give them, a fresh perspective here from the Weekly Dose.
All right, let's hear it.
This one comes to us from Salon. The headline here is Why Eating Cannabis Edibles Feels So Different from Smoking Weed, according to experts.
Wow.
These experts, I can't wait to hear about this. Nightmare trips are much more common with eating edibles. There's a bizarre scientific explanation as to why that is. So now, first off, this is a nice little, just a whiff of reefer madness here from Salon. This is
a little bit, yeah.
In this day, and this article's from I think today or yesterday. So they're still at it. They're still going at it. But obviously, this is as silly as saying I don't know, drinking something feels different from smoking it, shooting it up. Of course, different in ways of ingestion.
Eating your vegetables feels different than drinking them. Oh, wow.
Interesting.
This is news. Yeah.
So there's that. There is, I guess I will say, just from a non-scientific standpoint, expert being someone who's ingested a lot of drugs over the years, is that there is a different high, I would say, and it comes on differently, of course.
Sure.
But in terms of the nightmare trip, I would say that this falls back on the fact that a lot of people, when they talk about edibles, are in the circumstances we mentioned earlier, which are bought it in a parking lot at a show or got it, but before you had the dispensaries, right, they didn't know. So this is just another reason for, cause for legalization, but also or find a wonderful, charming local drug dealer like John Flynn, who has the consistency to be able to give it to you. So, in your experience, did you get a lot of this of people kind of saying, wow, this was a completely different experience from smoking? And like you said, you never even sold flower. You were just a straight edibles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true, but that's also people's, biology is different. Some people are allergic to things. Some people, cilantro tastes like soap. So yeah, I mean, I definitely had some people who would use them to help them go to sleep. Some people are just they just make me crazy. I don't like them, or some people have one. I think a lot of it too is people getting impatient and not knowing how to dose themselves on something, as we talked about, just being it's been 20 minutes, I need more. And you're like, no. So yeah, the fact that it is different it would be surprising if it wasn't. So it totally makes sense. And yeah, people respond to them differently. I mean, I do know some people who are just I cannot eat it. It's just, it really freaks me out. Or it just made them an insatiable Cookie Monster where they just couldn't stop eating, so you have to know yourself, basically, is what it is.
Yeah. And I feel a lot of this too feels like you're talking about people who are, once you get into being an adult, it's you had your experimentation time, you figure you're
right.
You should know yourself. I mean, not saying, maybe someone says, hey, at 30 years old, I want to start eating weed. But for the most part, I feel like that's the experimentation that you hope to do with people who are, friends, and you're around and you figure out your limits and your
place.
Yep. And all that. But again, sometimes, I don't know if this was your experience at UCB, but occasionally there's people, who come to the fold maybe just a little bit late on things, maybe theater kids who are I didn't party much in high school, and I'm off to the big city and I'm getting crazy. But still a good community for that, I suppose. It's better than most. Maybe not on stage you shouldn't. I remember there's a few people have some nightmare stories about, and I don't even particularly like to be as stoned on stage. What are your thoughts in terms of, as a great storyteller, host a show for many years of storytelling, how high do you like to get on stage, if at all?
I don't like to, the times that I've done it mostly have been when it's like, hey, at this show, everyone's going to get high and
right.
Tell stories or do stand-up or whatever that is. And I find that I don't think it helps. For me, it doesn't help. And it's funny, there were a lot of, because it was the improv community, a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm going to have one, right at the top of the show and, to see what it does, whatever. And they would usually just spend the rest of the show hugging the back line because you just so in your head. And, those situations where it's like, we're all high and everyone and the audience knows, and that's what they bought their ticket for and all that stuff. But I don't know, to me, I guess I'm sure for some people it works because there's some people who get high all the time and they are very functioning. And there's some people who are like, oh no, I've gotten high and I have to close the door and hide from the world. So I'm sure for some people that works. I'm not one of those people for whom that works. And so I experimented, a couple times, but if there was always like low stakes thing, like at an open mic, I'd be like, okay, I'll have this cookie and see how it feels.
Yes.
But the results for me were always like lame. You know what I mean? It was just like you just stumbled and muttered and looked like an idiot. So I was never a big fan of it. But there are some people who I sold to. Like there was there's one comic who they would have me deliver to them during their shows. Like I would come up on stage and sell them drugs during their show, and then they would take one and go on with their show, and I would leave. And I don't know what it was like for the audience because he never really explained what was happening. So it was just like some Howdy Doody came on and he sold him some cookies, left, and then this guy went on with his set. Like it was, I don't know what that audience thought was happening.
That's bizarre.
But for those people, great, God bless. But overall, for me, it doesn't work.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I get to be very quiet and in the head, which is immediately a sign I think people would know to be like, oh, he's fucked up in some way if he's not out here, hooting and hollering and doing his thing. I hug that back wall for sure. So Salon, thanks for this little piece.
Thanks for hard-hitting journalism. Wow.
Really, really tough. I mean, I guess they say
so
here,
brave of them.
What makes edibles so unpredictable in a way that inhaling? The reason is that eating cannabis produces metabolites that are technically a different drug from THC and I mean, this feels like
that might be true, but I don't know.
It's like, I mean, it may very well be, but it feels like one of those things where I'm like, who cares? Even if it is, like, I don't know what this, and if you're into science,
it turns it into a total, it's not like it turns cocaine into crack. You know what I mean?
Right. Or this is LSD. All the THC is now LSD in this.
They're going to start tripping.
Yeah. It feels a little bit like spooky.
Clickbait. Boo.
Now, one last thing I wanted to ask you too about your own business here is like, do you feel? I feel like if I were a customer of yours now, let's say, as these dispensaries are opening, if you were still in the game, I feel like it's the kind of thing that you would want to even stick with your you know what I mean? Like, would you feel threatened if the business had opened up as it did eventually? But let's say you were still in the game as it was happening, because it happened like pretty slowly relative. It was a few years where like this state, now that state. It took New York.
And I only did it in New York, and it hadn't happened at all by the time I got it.
But let's just hypothetically say, if it were to happen, like I feel like you built enough of a rapport with your clientele that you wouldn't even. I think you might lose some, but not most.
I think you would definitely, because also there's an element of convenience, but also I delivered, so it's not like people ever had to come to me. So it was very sort of like, for the most part, it was pretty easy for me to just come to wherever people were.
That's right.
Whenever they needed me to. Yeah, and I think also too, like the level of trust in that relationship, because that was something too that was really nice too, was the people who I knew over the year, knew over years and got to know, so I think that this definitely was I think I definitely could have stayed on. I might have had to adapt and like maybe do more specialized things or try to do more stuff that dispensaries weren't doing, but also like my drugs. I found a method to make these cookies really effective for really cheap. So my rates were really cheap too.
Yes.
So I think I think I probably could have survived.
You have them beat on a lot of levels.
Yeah.
You do have them beat on a lot of levels. The delivery guys, they're not delivering. They'd be like, hey, listen, these dispensaries.
The thing I used to joke about is the thing that would probably have shut me down would have been health code violations, because I just made them in my kitchen. And my kitchen was clean, but was it like,
Oh, yes.
Like absolutely
Sure.
like legal clean. You know what I mean? Like
Yep,
who knows? It wasn't, but it was fun.
Well, it was a New York City kitchen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you don't have the money to grease the wheels, it's like all New York City kitchens are not
Yeah,
the
exactly.
best. You don't want to peek behind the curtain in any of those spots.
No.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. I feel like I think that's probably true. I also think there's you get into this a little bit later in the book about the mail order service as well, which kind of became a little bit of an issue for you.
It did,
because that's something that obviously the dispensaries are, you ain't getting in the mail from them either. But I think that's something. There's probably a reason. There's a whole nother laundry list of things you got to consider when you're mailing it out. And I think you had an issue with the FedEx delivery, which kind of became a little dicey.
Yeah, that became sort of the beginning of the end for me.
Yeah.
What I found out later was that if you send them FedEx or like UPS, they're allowed to look at packages if they deem them. If I sent them through regular mail, they can't do that.
USPS, right?
Yeah. So I was like, oh, had I been doing that? But the post office near my place was very many blocks away. There's a UPS just a block away.
Of course, the convenience.
It's really what it is. Yeah,
sure. But with convenience comes we can maybe take a peek inside of here if we want. Again, it's a great book. I recommend definitely picking it up. There's a lot of personal fun stories, and like you said, some famos in here who've especially gone on certainly since
definitely
to heights as we know a lot of our friends at UCB. So yeah, I think that there's a lot to be gleaned from this book, and thank you for writing it, even from a perspective of the stigma. And
thank you, and also it teaches you how to make them yourselves if you're interested in doing that.
I mean, there you go. Now we're to the next generation of John Flynn. Let's see if we can take on big cannabis. Let's see if the mom and pop can open up.
Finally, yeah.
Yes. Well, let's slide into our next segment here, John. I'm a child of the '80s, and
sure.
I feel like that period and into the early '90s even was the golden age of the PSA, the anti-drug PSA.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nancy Reagan. Yeah.
Big time. But growing up, I always thought PSA stood for propaganda, stigma, and ALF.
Losers are users, so don't use drugs. Don't use drugs. Ha! Ha!
Come to find out, it's a public service announcement of some sort. So this week I pulled this one. Now I don't know if how much of the show you watched, but there's a little program called Growing Pains that was on television for many years. And there's an episode on this one, and they did this a lot on shows that they'd start to do. There's your classic, whatever drug-free America people that put the commercials on, but then they worked their way into the propaganda worked its way into some of the media that we were, of course, consuming. Mm-hmm. And one of those shows that really went for it was Growing Pains, where there was an episode that I believe someone tried to sell Mike some coke or something at a party.
Wow.
Seaver was, and I don't know that he. Now I'm trying to remember the friends. I think there was Booger, but wasn't Booger was a friend of one of the younger kids. I don't know who was who, but there's.
The Bone or something like that?
The Bone. Boner,
yes,
Boners to Bone, right? That's right. What a great... Boners to Bone went on to do some adult film acting.
Couldn't do that today.
No, Lord no. Lord no. Yeah, Boners to Bone said no to coke. That was the real...
There's your headline.
So they had this episode where he was offered some cocaine, said took thought about it, had a internal struggle, spoke to his old man about it. But then this is the post show. This is after the episode. They really wanted to hammer the point home, so they had Kirk as himself now, stepping out of character. Direct address. And very conceptual. I'll just let the piece speak for itself here. Let's take a look at it.
Can't wait.
Struggling on that table.
Hi. A lot of people tell you that drugs are cool. And they're the same people who are saying that everybody's doing something, so what's your problem? Well, they're wrong. Everybody's not doing drugs, and you don't have to try them to be cool. Look, I'm not trying to tell you how to live your lives.
But you are.
I am telling you that you don't have to do something you don't want to just to keep your friends happy. I mean, if that's the way that they feel, then maybe they're not your friends.
Ooh.
And maybe they're not as cool as you thought they were. And one last thing. I'm not being paid to say this. This is how I feel. And if you think that makes me uncool, then you're wrong.
Huh. That's not what makes you uncool.
No, no. So for the listeners, there's like a banquet table. And I don't know
Like
what
a
the
little weird
context
party
is.
scene, but it's like for what's this party for? Because it's like
Age-
teenagers and adults, but it's also the 80s, so like everyone kind of looks like they're in their 30s.
Yes, exactly. It's hard to place the age of the party,
Anyone.
people at the party. It's a pretty it looks a little fancier than like
Fancy, a lot of
house
shoulder
party.
pads.
Lot of power shoulder pads. Everyone freezes. They're talking, laughing, and then right before Cameron walks out, everyone turns to the camera.
The lights change.
They come right down the barrel and they freeze. He comes out, almost stumbles a bit getting on this table. He sits on the table, the banquet table for some reason.
Real cash, just
Real
talking.
cash.
It's not a banquet table.
Yep, and then they're slowly pushing in on him throughout it's a great direction.
But everyone in the background is locked in eye contact to the camera. Like Sylvester, the bone was there.
The bone is in there.
Yeah,
the bone is frozen.
He's in frame the entire time.
He is.
There's no way he wasn't paid for that.
Nonsense. I mean, also SAG,
Totally
are you going to
lie.
step in? Like, what was you? You just did this for nothing? Yeah. I'm not being paid for this is something someone who's being paid for things says.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you'd be like, why'd you mention that? I wouldn't have thought one way or the other.
No
But
one
now-
was talking about money at all. Okay.
Yeah, he's like, this is just how I feel. Now, Kirk Cameron,
I can do this because I'm not buying drugs. That's why.
right. Yeah. Yeah, so a powerful message that I feel like, again, for the age that you wouldn't laugh at this, I mean, even as a teenager, you'd think you'd laugh. So let's say it's the younger crowd watching Growing Pains. Let's say you're,
I guess.
12 years old or something. But even then, it's more confusing when you go, why did Mike become, who's Kirk? And what's, you know what I mean? 'Cause you didn't normally think of these people as who they were. You know, you see
we
the
didn't have
credits,
social
but
media then. We didn't know.
we had no idea. We thought he was
We
lived
just
above
had
the
Tiger
garage.
Beat. Yeah.
In his parents' house. We didn't know. So that becomes confusing because he's like not being paid. It's like breaking the fourth wall. There's a lot going on there that I think muddles the message for children anyway.
Yeah, it's confusing. The lighting's terrible.
Terrible lighting. Terrible. I mean, they made a lighting choice to change lighting.
They did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was, standard def, of course. We're trying to rip this from YouTube. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
Maybe it's that. Maybe it's the media. Do you remember there was one that Ally Sheedy did? Have you ever played that one?
Oh, you talking about, no, I have not, but the crack one?
No, I might be about crack. To me, what I remember is that it was basically the same thing of like, hey,
Right.
your friend did this impression, you did that, and you don't have to do that. And then she's like, if any of your friends say anything, you can just tell them, Ally Sheedy said it's not cool. And I was like, who is that going to work for?
Yes.
Some poor young girl tried that and was mocked mercilessly.
Forever. For the rest of
her
her
life.
Yep.
Would your friend Ally Sheedy say it's okay that you don't do drugs?
That haunted her for the rest of her days. Yeah. She had to
Poor
change
girl.
schools. Yeah, what a terrible piece of advice that's not going to help anyone. No, that's funny.
I think at the time, I think it was one of those things because that was pretty popular to have like anti-drug episodes of shows. Sure. I think there was like a tax write-off for that. I think there had to be something where it was like, oh,
You're
this is
absolutely
good. Like there's no way because all those people were doing drugs and all of those writers are
all the time. Yeah, no, there was a just say no. The Reagan Nancy herself showed up on set and was like,
different strokes. Yeah.
We'll give, yeah. So you're right. They're absolutely tax right, and none of that trickled down to the actors apparently, according to Kirk Cameron.
No, clearly they were doing it for free.
That's right. Yeah, he did that whole season for free. Actually, he was just like, you know what, this means so much.
This one's
to me.
for God.
This one's for God. This one's for God. Yes, just say yes to God after you say no to drugs. What a time that was for anti-drug.
Actually,
PSAs.
the first thing I did was an anti-drug movie. It was like it wasn't an after school. Maybe it wasn't
Oh my
after
God,
school.
John,
I don't remember
where do we
played.
see this?
It was called The Hard Facts About Drugs, Alcohol, Marijuana, Cocaine, and Crack. I don't know. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. I have a VHS copy of it that I obviously have not watched in years. But what was funny is, so it was like filmed mostly in my high school. And so like a bunch of us auditioned. We were so excited we were going to be in a movie. And I'm not in a lot. I'm basically just an extra. But there's like a framing device where it's like we're all coming in. It's our first day of school. And we're all like sitting down for the class picture. And then like there's a voiceover. It's like the first day of school. I wonder what happens to all of them. And so like they take a picture of all, and there's like 20 of us. And then then there's this scene where like kids are drinking and there's that whole thing and like some kids die. And so then they cut back to that photograph and those two kids who died, they disappear from the photograph.
Oh my.
And then there's the marijuana one and someone dies. And then there's the cocaine one and the crack one. And so at the end, like
Back to the Future style. They're just disappearing
Exactly.
from the photo.
But randomly, how it just randomly happened is I'm sitting in the center of all of the people who died. So at the end, it's like me and a circle of empty chairs around me. And friends used to joke like, oh, it's like you gave them all the drugs. And it turned out to be prophetic. Although as far as I know, no one has died from any drugs that I've given them.
No fentanyl in those John Flynn cookies. Let's be clear.
No. But that's
hilarious.
My cinematic acting debut.
Well, I am doing a deep dive because, as you know, I'd love to pull some clips for this show. I'm going to have to see if I can get my hands on that movie.
Right.
Because,
well, if you do, let me know because
oh, God, yes. Yes, maybe if you would ever come back on, we could, do a little mystery science to it. We could watch it and talk about it.
Oh, that'd be great.
My goodness. Well, listen, those of us who've gotten into Baked have learned a lot about you, but maybe for those of us listeners who might not have, I'd like to have a few direct questions for you as we take a step inside the user's studio. We end our podcast session with a weekly dose version of the questionnaire that was used masterfully for 24 years by the great James Lipton inside the actor's studio. And the first question is, John Flynn, what is your favorite drug?
I guess marijuana, although I about 10 years ago started taking Ritalin and it's changed my life. So I guess in that way, it's very good.
A marijuana Ritalin combination.
Prescribed legally, but yeah.
Sure. Hey, that's none of my business, my friend. What is your least favorite drug?
Probably cocaine. I guess I haven't done it a bunch, but every single time I've done cocaine, the classic, I can't stop talking, red in the face. I keep asking if I'm annoying. The other thing though is I can't stop eating, which is very weird and unique reaction to cocaine. I understand.
Yes.
But I can't, every time I've done it, I just could not stop stuffing my face. And I was sort of like, this drug is not for me. It's, first of all, it's far too expensive. And then how crazy would it be if I just like blew up and people were like, what happened to John? Like, he became a coke addict. They're like, that makes no sense. That's
no sense.
Can't be
a
true.
Coke problem is gaining weight. My goodness. There's a lot to consume then. You're ingesting through the nostrils, through the mouth. It's just a constant.
Everything, just one big orifice in my face.
Goodness gracious. What age were you the first time you found yourself under the influence?
The first time I smoked pot was on my 16th birthday.
Aha, the sweetest of 16s. What celebrity's overdose death has had the most profound effect on you?
That's tough. There's so many great ones to choose from. Michael Jackson was the one that I was like, wow.
Sure.
Also, Philip Seymour Hoffman, I think, is another one. Or Heath Ledger are ones where you're just like, fuck, no. Or Amy Winehouse. And
yes.
Obviously, it's tragic when it happens to anyone. But I would say probably skew more to less Michael Jackson because he had this great career already. Whereas people like Amy Winehouse, you're like, she was just starting off. Imagine what we have been denied.
Yes, that's a good point.
But they're all tragic. What
What is your favorite slang word for cannabis?
Oh, a friend of mine and I call it talking to Rhoda.
Talking to Rhoda. That is a first. What drug would you now, this question, I'm going to put a little bit of an asterisk on because I have an actual drug dealer here, a former drug dealer here in the studio. What drug would you like to deal for a living is the question in general, but I will put the asterisk other than cannabis cookies.
Gotcha. Anything that's like a euphoric feel good. So, or maybe like mushrooms. Mushrooms are something that when I was selling weed, people always like, do you know someone who sells mushrooms? It was always hard to find someone, a reliable source for that.
Yes. And I'll tell you, the mushrooms should also maybe go into some sort of baked goods because at times the chalky, the tough
taste
to take.
Is, yeah.
Yes. What drug would you absolutely not like to deal under any circumstances?
Again, cocaine, because people who do cocaine are real needy.
Yes. A lot of late nights.
That you late night deal with.
Sure.
Yeah, not worth it.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear Amy Winehouse say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Indica or sativa.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Wonderful. John Flynn, these are your drug users. Oh my! That was delightful.
That was delightful. Have you ever? I went to a taping live once of Inside the Actors Studio. Did you ever get to do that?
I've not been. No. But
this will not surprise you. It was for Liza Minnelli. A lot of people,
yes.
and just 3 different people called me like, "Hey, I have an extra ticket to go see this. Do you want to go?" I was like, "Well, you're the 3rd person," and it was amazing.
How was Liza? Like, of all people,
I mean, she was. I mean, like you want to talk. You should have her on your podcast. I mean, she was great and goofy fun, and James Lipton is just such a pretentious like windbag.
Yes.
Just like you just wanted someone like. I think like her, she would be better suited by like a Graham Norton or someone who's just like, let's just have fun and be ridiculous.
Yeah, he won't. He refuses to. Even when there's jokes told, he won't take. He takes them too seriously. Yes.
Yeah. He's like almost like a therapist, where it's just like,
right.
Oh,
Yeah.
what did you mean by making a joke there? And you're like, I was trying to make a joke.
Dude, why won't therapists take joke? It's so funny. They have
They're
a hard
terrible
time.
audiences for trying out.
They really are.
I made my therapist laugh once, and it was like such a ha I won.
Yes, finally cracked the code, man. Well, listen, John, it was wonderful to have you on. Tell the listeners, your socials. Where can they find you? Of course, I'm going to pop this up again.
Sure.
In camera here. This is Baked, Sex, Drugs, Alternative Comedy, a memoir from John Flynn. I recommend everyone. But where can people follow you?
You can follow me. I'm bad at social media, but I'm on Twitter, jfly99. I'm on Instagram at John_Flynn99. I have a podcast with Mark Rennie called Two Old Queens, where we have guests come on, they pick a movie, and we rate it to figure out. Use a complex and Byzantine scoring system to figure out how gay the movie is.
It's a great program. I wish my buddy Lucas Hazlitt was on. I'd listen to that.
Oh, yeah. He's great.
Good. Yep.
So those places, you can buy the book on Amazon or my website, johnflynncomedian.com. If you buy it through my website, it is $5 more, but that extra money all goes to the Last Prisoner Project, which is a nonprofit that helps people who are incarcerated for selling marijuana.
Hell yeah.
You get a little, it costs a little more, but that money all goes to a great cause. So you can either buy it on Amazon or through my website.
Do it through the website.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, John.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me. This was such a delight.
Awesome. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been your weekly dose.
Hey America, there's no use in sleeping with your children, with your daughters, with your sons, and with your husband.
Self-Medicated Weekly Dose is hosted and produced by me, Murph Meyer, with support from Pop Culture Collaborative. Our theme song is My Congressman by 15, courtesy of Jeff Ott and Hopeless Records. Original artwork and production design by Diana Kolsky. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the program, you can listen to new episodes of Weekly Dose every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. While you're at it, subscribe to the Self-Medicated YouTube channel to see new video clips from the show each week. Follow me on Instagram at Murph Meyer. And for some top-shelf harm reduction resources, head over to selfmedicatedpod.com. Also, don't forget, you can call the Weekly Dose podcast anytime to leave me a voicemail message with your thoughts on drugs and the people who use them. Just pick up the phone and dial 443-MK-ULTRA. All right, that's about it for me. I'll see you next week. Love and solidarity. Goodbye.